The UK will remain in lockdown for at least 3 more weeks. The Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, said Britain is at a delicate and dangerous stage in this pandemic, and relaxing restrictions too soon could risk a second wave of coronavirus and even more deaths. He said the lockdown, which is now extended until at least the 7th of May, would only be lifted once the daily death toll comes down and experts can be sure the UK is beyond the peak. The latest official figures for the UK show there were 861 deaths reported in the last 24-hour period. It means that the total official number of deaths in the UK linked to coronavirus is 13,729. That number doesn't include deaths in care homes or in the community in England and Northern Ireland. Our political editor, Kuenssberg, reports.
The start of another day.
Come on then, kids.
Where looking out the window is the only way to see the world outside. More time for fun for Rocco and Bonnie.
Or some kind of exit strategy.
But for their parents in Wolverhampton, another 24 hours of working, playing, caring and cooking, all within the same 4 walls.
Chocolate everywhere.
Well, we've already done more than 3 weeks, and I guess in some ways that's been like an extended holiday. We've had the weather, we've just played a lot in the garden. But my fears about more time are more for the children. So I guess there's a danger that you could become quite worried about them missing out on things.
As the Foreign Secretary in the Prime Minister's place confirmed today, that time at home will be longer.
The government has decided that the current measures must remain in place for at least the next 3 weeks. We've just come too far, we've lost too many loved ones, we've already sacrificed far too much to ease up now. But we're now at both a delicate and a dangerous stage in this pandemic. If we rush to relax the measures that we have in place, we would risk wasting all the sacrifices and all the progress that has been made. And that would risk a quick return to another lockdown with all the threat to life that a second peak of the virus would bring and all the economic damage that a second lockdown would carry.
You've been very clear about why, in your view and Sage's view, now is not the time. As you said yourself, in other countries, people have been told when and what to expect. From what you know now, is it more likely that we're looking at another 3 weeks or maybe another 3 months?
We can't give a definitive time frame. That would be to prejudge the evidence. That wouldn't be a responsible thing to do. But our message to the British public is there is light at the end of the tunnel. We are making progress. If I start giving you artificial and arbitrary time frames, it would be the irresponsible thing to do, and I can't do that.
Come on, play!
Life under lockdown, certainly a juggle. The Rooks think they're fortunate, sharing childcare in a home office. But the situation's intensely tough for millions of people and dire for the economy.
Hey, darling, let me just send this cookie now.
On the 8th floor of a tower block in Birmingham, Tamika Gill lives with her 2 kids.
My kids bicker a lot. They're here together in a confined situation. It's stressful. I almost fainted yesterday, to be honest. It's like all that stress because I'm indoors and not being out like I used to be. So it's kind of made me feel a bit down.
So Labour is pushing the government for a timetable of sorts.
Whilst I support the extension of the lockdown, I do think the government needs to bring forward the exit strategy to tell us the principles on which things are going to change in a few weeks' time. They need to do that because they need the trust of the public. We're asking a lot of them, another 3 weeks, possibly more of lockdown.
But decisions haven't been taken about how and when restrictions will go, and there are nerves about giving the public the wrong impression. Likely to ease eventually, step by step.
When we do incrementally ease any of these restrictions, we must consider what we need to do instead to keep the virus under control. For example, testing and surveillance, contact tracing and isolation of people with symptoms.
With the progress of the disease flattening, moves towards lessening the limits of our lives are starting to be discussed, but the pandemic will have an impact on all our lives beyond next week, next month and perhaps next year. Kuenssberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, the government says there is light at the end of the tunnel, but restrictions can only be eased when 5 conditions are met. And that will be when they are sure the NHS can cope, when there's a sustained and consistent fall in the daily death rate, when the rate of infection is down to manageable levels, when there's enough PPE to meet future demand, and when experts are confident any loosening of restrictions wouldn't risk a second virus peak. Our science editor David Shukman looks at the benefits and risks of relaxing the lockdown.
Empty streets around the world, images that are now familiar of lockdown. A very blunt way to fight the virus, but it is working. And some countries are easing up. So what's involved in that? Well, first, a key question: is the daily death toll falling? That's yet to happen here in the UK, so for the moment the lockdown continues. Belgium has also extended its measures until losses are reduced day by day. And the World Health Organization is warning that any move must be very careful.
It is imperative that we do not let down our guard. Complexity and uncertainty lie ahead, which means that you are entering a period where we may need to rapidly adjust measures, introduce and remove restrictions, and ease restrictions gradually.
So how can the lockdown be relaxed when that moment eventually comes? In Spain, it was judged that construction work is safe enough to resume as a first step. In Italy, it's small shops like bookshops that have been allowed to reopen. While in Denmark, schools are seeing pupils return. Each of these steps brings benefits, but also comes with risks. And here in the UK, we don't know how the government is planning to handle this.
But I think it's essential that the government begins to tackle the issue of fear in the population and to restore confidence, because otherwise the lockdown strategy will fail simply because people won't go along with it.
And keeping track of the virus and where it spreads is vital after measures are relaxed. Germany is highly praised for testing huge numbers of people. Something similar will have to happen here. In Liechtenstein, they're planning to offer everyone a biometric bracelet in a radical drive to track the emergence of new cases. And apps like this will be needed to keep track of people's contacts, to spot symptoms and isolate any new outbreaks. The challenge for any government is to try to strike a balance between making sure that people do maintain social distancing while offering a sense of light at the end of the tunnel. And that bit of it is made all the harder by the growing realisation that this won't be over soon. And there's a warning that some restrictions will be needed until next year. The scientists trying to predict the pandemic say that until a vaccine is ready to create immunity to the virus, some social distancing will have to continue to keep people safe. David Shukman, BBC News.